Hi, Vern. Welcome to From the Stage Door.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no
Exciting.
problem. Right, I'm going to go straight into questions. So,
Okay.
a little bit of your background. Have you always had a passion for theatre and performing?
Yeah, because of Panto, really. I'm from a small town in the Welsh Valleys, really, other than my father was in the choir, other than that, the only sort of theatre we'd see would be Panto, really. Obviously, we'd go to the cinema, and then my older brother was in the school plays, which dragged me into the school plays. And yeah, but Panto was really the only sort of professional theatre that we'd see. So, and actually in Porthcawl, where I now play the Dame. So it's sort of gone full circle, which is very cool.
Cool. So, did you sort of train for your craft, or did you just learn it as you went along, go straight into auditions or youth theatre or anything like that?
Well, I did a BTEC in Performing Arts in Crosskeys College, or Coleg Gwent as it is now. So I'm very old. And and then I went to Liverpool and did a theatre degree, and then worked for about 8 or 10 years professionally in the Northwest and all over. And then went to the Poor School in London and did their training there. And that was 16 odd years ago, I think. So, and sort of been working ever since.
Okay. So, what was your first professional acting job?
Oh, that's a good question. So out of drama, when I finished my degree, I'd been doing a lot of extracurricular stuff. So it depends how you define professional, really. If I got paid, I suppose, is how I define professional. But stuff that people would pay to come and see, I mean, that happened during my degree. We did a version of Spike Milligan's Cocoon, a theatre version of that, which was great. And we took that to a few festivals in Holland and did a tour of the country, and the Edinburgh Festival here, when I was about 18 or 19. And then, but I guess the first sort of paid work would have been in Liverpool, where I did my degree, as I say. And there was a lot of, I think most actors who go through this sort of when you first graduate, you're trying to get any job you can, and a lot of the jobs that are not as well paid are shows that actually in the way of things should be very well paid. This is stuff that goes into schools, stuff for kids, and so I did a lot of children's theatre, a lot of TIE, theatre and education, a lot of touring, and I guess it would have been, I did a show called, am I going to remember the title of the show? It was a very long time ago. You're asking me hard questions here, I think it was called Messages from the Planet Arg. Arg, I think it was. And it was a show for kids in secondary school. Oh, blimey, in what we used to call the third year, which would be 7, 8, year 9. Where they're doing your options, and it was a show about choosing your options. Fascinating stuff, but it was very funny. We managed to make it into a funny show, even though it was a pretty dry subject, that was a tour of schools, and that was manic. You'd be up at whatever time in the morning, get to the van, drive to a school, unload the van, set up the set, do the show, do a Q&A or a workshop with the kids, strike the set, load the van, drive to a different school, do it all again, maybe do it all again after that, and then sort of go home. So you really earn your money on those shows, But I guess that would have been my first professional thing. Not particularly glamorous, but quite exciting when you're 21. I guess I would have been, thinking, I'm doing what I want to do. I'm earning a living as a performer,
Yeah. And do you think that put you in good stead for Panto with kids sort of randomly shouting stuff at you as you do that?
Yeah, and just multiple shows a day. I'm very, very happy with the Grand Pavilion Portugal. They only do 2 show days. A lot of pantos these days do 3 show days, and it's got quite common. And I kind of think on those days everyone's getting short shrift. You know, the first show everyone's thinking, I've got to do another 2 of these. The middle one you sort of kind of go, no, this should be the last one, I'm going to do another one, and then the last one you're knackered. So I don't know that anyone's getting a good show. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are getting fabulous shows every time you do a 3-show day, but I always feel like, are they really, is everyone really getting a 1 performance on a 3-show day? I think probably not, but this might just be because I'm old and lazy, I don't know, but I think if you have anyone in your cast over 40, you shouldn't be allowed to do a 3-show day.
I'll go with that. So who would you say was your greatest influence growing up?
From performance standpoint, well, the first person who popped into my head then was Eric Morecambe. So he had, and I think his way of sort of breaking the fourth wall and looking into camera, and like he's doing something here, and he goes, and he notices you, you know, and it's a real connection. He had obviously he was a great improviser and had great Eddie Braben scripts as well, of course. But I think, Eric Morecambe, Joyce Grenfell. Do you know Joyce Grenfell?
They were heard, yes.
Oh, yes, she's as stately as the galleon. Her specials were on when I was a very little kid, and they were, even though they would have been on later for adults, there was no content that was adult, as it were, so we were allowed to stay up and watch her shows, and now I have them all on DVD, and she's brilliant, and she's all over YouTube. If you don't know who Joyce Grenfell is, then people should, look her up, because she does these straight-to-camera monologues. And it's sort of, I guess you'd call it character stand-up now, really. But Victoria Wood, Billy Connolly, live. I mean, of course, I saw Stan Stennett in Panto multiple times. Billy and Bonzo, and he was a huge Panto performer here in Wales. And now my dressing room is dedicated to him. So in Porthcawl, so all the walls are lined with photos and posters of Stan Stennett. So absolutely live. It probably would have been, as a kid, it would have been him. There was no one else to. There wasn't, as I say, wasn't a lot of other sort of live performance that I was taking in. But certainly on TV at the time when I was a kid, there was Blackadder, Birth of the Alternative Comedy movement, ones, and although I kind of prefer The Good Life to The Young Ones, if I'm honest, they have one of their episodes, they smash through the title sequence of The Good Life, don't they? But and I recently rewatched The Good Life, got it on DVD and watched it, and it's so great. It's still really great. Completely stands up, as does Blackadder, of course. But so lots of things. I think as with everybody, I mean. I would have been pretty young. I have a very strong memory of. Do you remember the series An Audience With?
Yes.
You'd have, and all sorts of people have done them, and Billy Connolly's and Victoria Wood's Audience With shows are, I think, still 2 of the best hours of stand-up that's ever been filmed. But you should, seek those out. They're probably on YouTube as well. Everything's on YouTube, isn't it?
Everything's on YouTube, yeah.
I just watch everything on YouTube.
So what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received, and not just performance-wise, just in life in general?
Oh, wow. Well, a very simple acting thing. A great... It's in the way of things, you'll study for years, and then you'll do, and you'll learn stuff, but you don't really notice that you're learning stuff. And then you'll do a show with someone, and someone will just drop a little bon mot, and you'll just go, and it'll just slot everything into place, And it's a very simple thing, but if you have a line where you're sort of coming in halfway through or you're going out, always, and it works on a larger scale with scenes as well, sort of know where you've been and know where you're going. And so you enter knowing why you're entering the scene, you leave with purpose, you know, and if you have a line that sort of starts halfway through, have the rest of the sentence, know what you're going to say, or know what you were thinking before you say, and just sort of, it's homework really, to do some homework is the advice really, but it's a very simple thing on a very specific level on a line level, but then as you extrapolate that out to the whole show, it kind of covers everything, you know where you are and why you're there.
Yeah,
it's kind of, you know, that's sort of 2/3 of performing really is when, you know, enter the scene knowing your motivation. As a terrible actor thing to say, my motivation, but it's you know, it's really kind of everything. If you know why you're somewhere, how you react to everything is said to you, is obvious and makes sense, because you're not having to process it, because you're already in the mindset, I guess.
Yeah.
And I guess sort of life advice, I mean, it's, you know, I think it's the old thing of, you know, the harder I work, the luckier I get, you know, and I think that's the thing. You just got to, you know, chip away at stuff and you know, don't be an arse. That's the other thing. Am I allowed to say arse? I've
You
said it
are,
twice.
yes.
Said it twice now. I don't care. Yeah, it's easy to, especially doing what I do, really, you can, especially on film as well, you're very cosseted, and they need to know where you are all the time, and they'd rather keep you here and go and get you a cup of tea than have you go and get the cup of tea yourself, you know, and it's very easy to sort of fall into that coddled frame of mind. And Panto is great for that, because there's no time for any of that, because everything's hell for leather. You're doing a massive show in 10 days. If you're lucky, you've got 10 days, including tech, and you just got to sort of pull your weight, I suppose. And, you know, for some of us, that's a larger tug than others.
So how do you deal with nerves when you're performing? Do you have any dressing room rituals or anything like that?
I think you sort of have to accept them and welcome them into your existence. Yeah, there's no point fighting nerves. I think if you're not nervous at all, then you don't care enough, really. Some people, I guess, don't get nervous, but I think there's an element of concern that it's not going to be rubbish, you know. And my only thing really is that I go a bit quiet for the half an hour or so before a show, whatever it might be. I get pretty quiet, which is, as you can tell, is not my natural state of being. Years ago, I was on tour with a great performer called Steve Loader, and his thing is the exact opposite. He likes to be doing stuff right up until you go on, you know, and he wanted to do this sort of concentration exercise where you count back and forth, and you however many of you there are, you count one higher. So there's two of us, so we count up to 3, and you go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and he keeps going back and forth. And he'd want to do that to focus in on me and sort of, you know, synchronize our performing watches, if you like, before we went on stage. But like 3 minutes before we went on stage, and a couple of days in, I had to say, look, man, I'm losing my mind. You need to, I'm happy to do anything you want, but I need, like, give me 10 minutes. Can I have 10 minutes? And he's like, yeah, sure. And yeah, I'd happily go and stand, you know, at the end of the Blair Witch Project, stand in the corner facing the wall, you know, for the 10 minutes before I go on. And with Panto, of course, it's, you know, they follow a sort of routine. So I share a dressing room with the comics, so like the wishy-washy character, if it was Aladdin, for example. So they always go up before me. So I always have a little bit of quiet before it's my turn to go up. And usually there's some sort of costume thing so my dresser will come in and tweak and check that everything's right. And then getting up to stage, and then I always get up quite early, and in the wings if I can. If I'm not going to be in anyone's way, I'll be in the wings for a good 5 minutes before it's my first entrance, and listen to the crowd, have a feel of what it's like, and just sort of center, really, just sort of focus. And there's not. I mean, I'm not Al Pacino. There's not a lot of getting into character with Dame. Let's not get carried away. But it's. But I like to pump myself up and as I say, focus and and it's not sort of running lines or thinking about bits or anything. It's just often just not thinking about anything, just watching what's happening on stage, maybe joining in with the song, or whatever's happening before I go on, so a little bit of focus, I guess, before I go on.
Cool. What would you say has been your most challenging role to date?
Well, I love to say I was a dead body in Silent Witness, but no, that one must be a terrible job, just lying there.
I'd giggle.
Well, yeah, and especially if it's, and with Silent Witness as well, because you're often lying there in the nud as well. Can you imagine just lying there all day? Oh, no. Well, I played Macbeth. That's quite a few years ago now, 17 odd years ago, and that's an amazing part, obviously. And we toured the UK, and then we toured Canada with that, which was really good fun. And it was a heavily adapted version, just two of us, a two-hander. And it's sort of like Macbeth is like 4.5 hours long with a cast of like 30 or something. So we did it in an hour with two of us. So it was quite helpful ever. And it was brilliant, and working with a great actress alongside me. But I think maybe you have little points as you're going through. I want that bit to be like this. I want this bit to be like that. You figure out how you want it to go whilst reacting to whatever's going on around you. And I think maybe we did that show, I don't know, 60 or 70 times, I guess, maybe something like that on that tour. And I think I hit everything once. I came up, I thought, I think I ticked all my boxes. Oh my God, but I think that's probably about right. Is that it should only happen about once, But so I guess it would be that. I did a show about psychosis that was devised and quite involved, and all took place in my character's head. And the character was experiencing everything as an episode of Star Trek. Wow. So the set was a spaceship, and we're all in sort of uniforms and badges and all that kind of business. And that was quite heavy. There was quite a lot in that. So have I answered your question? I can't remember what the question was. Yeah. So I think, probably Shakespeare stuff, I guess, there's a lot in that to get right, and great fun to do as well. There's loads of research and just figuring out what everything means, and
I think with Shakespeare, you can kind of put your own spin on it as well, can't you? Your own sort of adaptation of it, really, while still sticking with the script. Yeah,
and I think if people have gone out and watched Shakespeare and going, I didn't get it, well, it's like maybe you just didn't watch very good Shakespeare. It's just like there's, his plays are being done all the time, so not every production is brilliant. And if the actor works hard enough to know exactly what they are saying, then the audience shouldn't have to work. It should just come across.
Yeah. What would be your dream role or your dream show to be in? And it doesn't have to be gender specific, can be anything.
Good, because it's Dorothy and the Golden Girls. I would have loved to have been Dorothy and the Golden Girls. Maybe I should find 3 other dames and we could just remake the Golden Girls. That'd be great. I'm more of a Blanche. part that I would never get to play would probably be something like, Captain America or something. Being that guy. Yeah. I think being Chris Evans is probably pretty great. Even when he's not being Captain America, being Chris Evans is probably pretty good. I guess a part that I could conceivably play. I don't know if they suddenly started casting Doctor Who like they used to in the 60s and 70s, I could maybe get in on that. I think everyone's either a bit young or pretty or female for me to be sort of relevant anymore. I would have loved to have played. I suppose it's conceivable. I can kid myself that it's still conceivable, can I? But maybe, the Doctor would be a great part to play because it's everything. You get to do everything, which is why I think, so many of those actors maybe didn't have the career afterwards that you would expect because you've seen them do everything. There's everything is within that, if it's done as well as it used to be, maybe I think as a sort of stage character, I'd like to do Willy Loman in Death of a Salesman. I had a swing at Chekhov a few years ago, and it was all right. I'd like to have another swing at that. Something else, maybe Uncle Vanya or the Seagull, maybe. There are loads of great sort of classic parts. You kind of I'm still a bit young for King Lear, but that's my favourite Shakespeare show. So I think when I get there, as much as the beard is, it's still a way off. I'd like to have a swing at that and see how that goes. Yeah, so there's lots of things I'd like to do, really.
That's cool. Lots still to do. So that's good. What has been the funniest thing that's happened to you on stage?
Oh, wow. Well,
Panto, everything, right?
Well, yeah, there's the thing with Panto is I think if you go and sometimes you go and see a Panto, you kind of think, oh, they do that pretend forgetting their line every show. And I'm sort of against that. But I'm very up for when someone forgets their line or something goes wrong or something breaks, you go with it. Yeah. And in a way, that you can in Panto in a way that you can't in, if you're playing Macbeth and, the dead body on the floor coughs, you have to ignore it because otherwise you're going to ruin Macbeth, Whereas if it's Panto, you can go out and get him a packet of lockets, you can really sort of go with it, Yeah. I think the first Panto I did in Porthcawl, we did Aladdin and I was playing the genie before I started daming. And it's a very small theatre. It's a very large auditorium, a very small stage, the pavilion. So it's if you don't know, it's a massive sort of dome with a little box on the end. The little box is where the theatre is. So is where the stage area is. So the wings are probably on one side are about 8 or 10 feet deep, and the other side a little bit more, but there's not a lot, and loads of stuff in them, loads of set, and you're always crawling around stuff to try and get through. So everything looks great on stage, but everything's sort of piled up on itself backstage, And we had a bit in Aladdin where the genie creates turns Aladdin into a prince and creates a palace, right? Yeah. And the way we were creating the palace was we had a flat painting of a palace on essentially on a baton, right? Right. And it would be raised up on sort of two bits of rope on either side of the stage that you couldn't see, and it was just this thing would magically rise up, and all the adults would wet themselves laughing at it, and all the kids would go, "Oh, this palace is rising up out of the ground," And so it got to where it's supposed to go, and of course, off stage, there's one of the crew. And it was Dave, hello Dave, tying it off. And as he tied it off and let go, the rope sort of went taut and the whole thing dropped about 2 inches. Boom. Sort of dropped like that and sort of did this, And so I'm sort of raising it, raising this palace up, and then eventually it stops. and then it drops, and I go, huh! Like it's going to suddenly. And I turned to the audience, and it completely wasn't a gag for the kids at all. But I turned to the audience and went, "Well, you often get a bit of settlement with a new build." And of course, all the adults went, "Bah!" And all the kids went, "What?" And then we carried on. But that was a really, and of course, that ended up being in the show every night. So. So that was great fun. But I mean, I nearly drowned someone in fake blood once. We were doing a kids version of Dracula. And it was around the time that the movie came out, the Francis Ford Coppola movie with Keanu Reeves. So we'd done an adaptation of that, and it was my job when one of the brides was sort of gets bit or something happens, was she had lines, and then she would fall to the ground. We'd crowd around her. Whilst we were crowding around her, I'd squirt a little bottle of fake blood into her mouth. She'd sort of rise up and go, and this little bit of fake blood would trickle out the sides of her mouth, and she'd leave, you see. So, always check your prop table, because I didn't have the little bottle, right? So I had to take the large bottle of fake blood on. It was about like a litre bottle of this fake blood. And I kind of glooped some into her mouth. And of course, loads came flying out. Absolutely covered her whole face. She can't breathe, So she sits up, bolt upright, coughs. This huge gout of blood comes flying out of her mouth and nose. All the kids, the teachers were supposed to take the smaller kids out after we were doing 3 shows, and they were supposed to take the little kids out. Of course, they never did, because the kids were teaching them, going, I'm going to fight, it's great. So all the kids were tiny little kids. Suddenly this person's face is missing because it's covered in blood. She goes, all this blood goes everywhere. She kind of stands up and has to stagger off, And the little puddles on the floor after that one. I could, I apologised. What can you do? Yeah, she wasn't, as you can imagine, nearly drowning in paper. She was not best pleased. But,
nice theatre, you take it as it comes.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Okay, has there been any props or costumes that you've kept on shows?
What have you stolen is essentially what you're asking me, isn't it?
I'm not going to dob you in at all, I promise. I don't know. Well, a couple of years ago, I did a tour of Hard Times, the Charles Dickens. That was great, with Lighthouse Theatre based in Swansea. Brilliant. And they had a costume made for me. And then, they were like, do you want to buy this? Because who else are we going to use it for, So I got that, which was very nice to have a waistcoat and sort of Dickensian waistcoat and trousers that had been made for me. So that was very nice. But sort of something that's, well, I had a costume. Oh, am I going to get dobbed in for this? I mentioned this. It was a long time ago. But I'm still working for those people. I had a costume, and it was a dame costume, and it was a whole beef burger. Oh, wow.
And one of the things on it was a little tiny button mushroom. Well, it was supposed to be tiny, but it was about this big. And it came loose and was put to one side. And my daughter, who was 4 at the time, 4 or 5, really took to it. And I kind of let her keep it, which I shouldn't have done, really. But I'm very sorry, everyone at, come Panther people at the pub. But she still has it, and still, it's still on her bed even to this day. So that's quite sweet, isn't it? They can have it back when she's old, I suppose, and doesn't want it anymore. But I get that's the kind of sweetest thing. That's the cutest thing. A little button mushroom.
That's cute. Okay, have you ever done a job that you wish you could leave off your CV, or do leave off your CV? Isn't that really bad?
Well, it's rare. I mean, when you're a jobbing actor, you go from job to job. There's a lot of rubbish that you end up doing, and or rubbish bits in stuff that's good. I mean, I was in a movie with. Kind of overstating the fact I was in this movie. I was supposed to be in this movie, and the cast was incredible. It was Meg Ryan, Sam Neill, Robert Downey Jr., David Thewlis, amazing cast, right? A film called Restoration.
Okay, it's not a very good film, but they shot it in Caerphilly Castle, and which is quite local to me. So I was actually working on this film when I should have been graduating from university. So my mum didn't get to see me with my cap and gown because I was dressed in all sorts of nonsense in doing this film, which is set around the sort of Charles I sort of time. So long wigs and cloaks and all of that. And I had long hair at the time. So they were looking for people with long hair so they didn't have to have wigs for everybody, so it was cheap. And I was supposed to be a doctor in this scene. And there was talk of there being a line, but I don't know if that was a lie. And then they decided that they had one too many doctors, and I was the youngest, so I was bumped out because they wanted the doctors to look older. And so I didn't get a line, didn't get a thing, didn't get to be in the scene that I was supposed to be in. So I was just wandering around in a castle for a week doing sort of extra work, really. And I am very, very briefly in front. I kind of walk like sort of on your screen, sort of, I kind of walk, I'm in the film for that much, and I'm chatting to someone and I'm playing with my hair because it's really windy. And it's like, I mean, it all looks very natural because it was just me chatting, but there's no acting involved, Yeah, and the rest of the time I was just sort of sat behind something, because if you do an extra work, little tip for if you're going to do any extra work is if you get seen, they tend to send you home because they don't want the same faces to keep reappearing. So whenever anything's happening, you sort of point at things across your face all the time so that you don't get seen, so you can get more days on the job, but it was complete opposite of leaving off my CV, because there was this big movie with these big movie stars in, and I pretended I had a character name. It was on my CV for years that I was in Dr. Ryan in restoration. Absolute nonsense, complete lie. I mean, not the truth at all. But there are things. I mean, a lot of the early sort of TIE stuff isn't really on my CV anymore because it won't mean anything to anyone who reads it. So if I'd done, I don't know, the Cherry Orchard when I was 20, then people know what the Cherry Orchard is. And if I'd done it in a theatre that people would recognise, it would be worth leaving on because it would mean something to someone. But when you've done some, Let's Read show in, Bootle High School, no one cares. It doesn't help or hinder. So a lot of that stuff is all sort of dropped off the end of the CV, really. But and sometimes you take stuff off because it feels like it was ages ago, and it makes you feel old. But yeah, no, it's all on there. I don't mind. I'm up for people seeing all the nonsense I've done.
So, which is your favourite theatre to perform in?
Well, there's a few. We're really lucky here in the UK. There are literally hundreds of theatres, and there are some really lovely spaces to work in. And mostly, it's a nice theatre to work in when the staff are cool and welcoming, which is surprisingly not always the case when you come into a theatre. You go, "Hi, we're doing the show tonight," and they go, you can think, well, wouldn't you not have a job if there was no one here doing shows? It's a bit bizarre that you're not at least pleasant. You don't have to like me, but say hello. And some places people are super grumpy. But that's kind of rare. I've been working at the Grand Pavilion in Portugal for 10 years now, and as I say, I used to go there as a kid. So it's a sort of part of my life, really, and I love it. I love working there. I love the panto audience. We have the best panto audience. They go absolutely cray. It's fantastic, and it's good fun. Really, really good fun. And everyone there is nice. All the way from the box office staff to the cleaners to the guys in the cafe to the crew who'll do anything for you. They're great, Yeah, that's a really great place. There's a great theatre in Liverpool called the Unity. They're sort of one of their smaller theatres. And a long time ago now, it was renovated. But before it was renovated, when I was in university, it was the space where we would do shows when I was doing my degree. And it was a really intimate, small space. And that was a fantastic place. You could literally see the spill from the lights from the stage was such that you could see every face in the room, which I really like. A lot of actors don't. A lot of actors like darkness. They want the black, shout into the abyss. Whereas I quite like to see the faces. When I do Dame, I try and work into the lighting plot that whenever I come on, the house lights come up.
Yeah.
So like 20%, and so not enough so the audience feels exposed, but enough that I can see everyone and I can sort of, we're all in this together kind of thing. Yeah. But a lot of actors hate that. It's just me and my character and my art. And actually in Birmingham, I'm going to forget the name of it, but there's a big art centre in Birmingham. And within it is a little theatre space that was created for puppetry.
It's not the market.
And it's like it's literally a puppet theatre. It's amazing, and it's a really small little wood-panelled room. And I was doing a show that was based on Kafka's The Trial. Okay. Instead of an endless trial, it was an endless pool game. An odd show. It was a great show, but odd show. And we performed it there, and that was a really great space because again, really, really intimate. Quite small, just barely enough space for this pool table on the stage. And it was a really good show with a great actor that I was working opposite. So yeah, but there are lots. But those are the three off the top of my head.
What would you say has been your most surreal moment when performing, like your pinch me moment?
A pinch me moment? I don't know. I don't know if it's a pinch me like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm, on stage with Brad Pitt or something, I don't know if I've had a moment like that as such. Although I've worked with some great performers over the years. But I came on stage for a comedy show that I used to do with a couple of other Welsh comics called The Committee Meeting. Mm-hmm. And the other guys were on stage, blah, 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 and they introduced my character, and on I walked, and my friend was there that night in the audience, and he'd brought his mum. Mm-hmm. And she, from the audience, I walked on, full character, giving it the whatever I'm giving it, and she goes, ooh, hey, Vern! And carried on waving, kept waving, until I was like, hi. And so, that's surreal. I think that kind of, it's like, what are you doing? And she's lovely, but obviously nuts. And so she just sort of waved at me until I acknowledged that she was there, I guess that, but I don't know about a thing where I've worked with, where I can't believe I'm doing this here. This is amazing, because it's, I guess by the time you're doing stuff, it's sort of, it kind of feels right that you're doing what you're doing where you're doing it, I suppose. I'm trying to think if I've done any sort of, as opposed to Dr. Ryan in Restoration, any sort of actual sort of film stuff where I was sort of like, oh, wow, that's so-and-so, But I can't really think of anything. I did an episode of Stella. Mm-hmm. Did a couple of episodes of Stella, and had a scene with Ruth Jones, and then worked with her later. She's very nice. But Ramon Tickeram. Do you remember Ramon Tickeram? Do you know who that is?
Yes.
Now, he was in This Life. That was the first time I ever saw him in anything. Yeah. Obviously his sister had been famous earlier for singing. Mm-hmm. And he had like the long hair and he was a biker, and he was kind of like this sort of big presence in This Life, and then I met him, and he's really little.
Oh, wow.
And he was a really lovely man, and he's got this great look, his amazing face, but he barely comes up to my shoulder, little tiny man. But we, as it happens, it was around the time that my daughter was going into secondary school, and we'd looked at the school that his
daughters are in. So we ended up, in the way of things, talking about kids and school all day, and he was very nice, but yeah, he was tiny. So that was he was like a sort of little fun-sized version of himself, so that was quite nice. But yeah, a good actor as well, of course. But he was, very nice. But that was slightly odd, I guess, that he was so tiny. I thought he was far away.
What advice would you give to your younger self?
I think go to the gym more. Honestly, come on. And I think it's probably, however hard you think you're working, you need to work harder. And I think that's in most areas of work, I think that's probably true. If you want to get to a certain level, whatever you're doing, whether it's working in a factory, which I've done, or working in a shop, which I've done, or or working as a performer, working for yourself, essentially. It's a lot more work than you think it's going to be to get to a level where you might want to be. So I think, and don't be afraid to go up to that person and say, hello, I'm good, give me a job. You can be too shy and retiring, and there's no, if you're stood off to one side thinking they'll notice me any second, that's just not the truth. You have to go over and you have to say hello, and you have to be prepared to maybe be told to sling your hook, and I think you have to put yourself on the line, especially in this business, maybe a lot more than is comfortable if you're a relatively nice person.
You don't ask, you never know, do you?
Well, exactly, and you have to have faith in yourself as well. You need to have faith that you are able to do the job that you're telling them that you can do. And if you, 9 times out of 10, they don't not give you the job because you can't do it. It's just that you don't, you're too short or too tall or too fat or too thin or too black or too white or too whatever it might be, And I've cast shows as well. And as an actor, then as a director or whatever casting, and the whole group of people walks in and you go, yeah, no, maybe, no. And they haven't done anything yet. They haven't said a word. They haven't, and you can change people's minds. I've cast shows where people have come in and have gone, no. And then they've just been amazing. So you've got to, be ready, do the homework, I guess, and be ready on the day to, shine.
Definitely. Right, we're going to look at panto work. So do you think it was, like you've mentioned before, that you played other roles, you played Jeannie as well as Dames. Do you feel it was a natural progression to get to the part of the Dame, or?
I don't know if it was a natural progression. It was what I wanted to do. In the way of things, I auditioned for Imagine Theatre, who produced really 16 or 18 pantos around the country. And I auditioned for King Rat in Loughborough. And I went in and I spoke. And there was a chap there called Ian Lachlan. I don't know if you know Ian Lachlan, but Ian Lachlan created the Tweenies.
Okay.
And he was when I was a kid, he was on like Play School and Play Days and was Finger Mouse. When Finger Mouse came back, he was the guy with the blonde curly hair. He was there, and I thought, oh, I know him, kind of thing. And from being a human child, and he said, oh, are you Welsh? And I went, yeah. And he said, oh. And it happened to be that year was the first year they'd got the tender to do panto in Porthcawl. Mm-hmm. So I did a little bit of King Rat, and then they gave me the genie speech because they were looking for genies there. And I went out and figured out what I was going to do with it, and then came back in and gave them my suit. I figured if they were interested in me being Welsh, I should Welsh it up. So I did it very super camp. Oh my God, can't believe it. Look at you, man, isn't it? I did down in my cave, rubbing my lamp. Cheeky, and I give it all of that.
Yeah.
and sort of made them laugh with their own script, which is always a good sign. And so Loughborough became a thing of my past, and Fourth Call became my future. And I went in there and sort of did my genie suit, and I just went all out, you know, as big and as ridiculous as I could do. And I had a great cast. Tony Wright, who was sadly just passed away very recently, much too young, was Dame that year. And he was very encouraging. Worked with Chris Corcoran, and who was at the time was doing a show called Doodle Doo that was huge on CBBC or CBBS, and he was, you know, really up for improvising and making everything as good as we could. And I just had an absolute blast, you know. And they asked me to come back the next year, and they were doing Beauty and the Beast. And they sent me the script, and I was playing a character called Pimple, which when you, what was I, 34? There's not a lot of dignity in playing a character called Pimple when you're 34, you know. And I read through the script, and, you know, the character, he had about 4 lines. And you know, there's nothing wrong with not having a lot of lines. There is. But you kind of think, oh, did I mess up last year? They just give me a tiny part. Like, you know, I'm just sort of standing in the background in most of these scenes, you know. And so I spoke to them, you know, they'd say me, do you want to do this? And I spoke to them and said, yeah, I'll do it. I said, the character doesn't really say anything. Is there, what's the deal, you know? And they said, oh, we just figured you'd make stuff up to say Vern. Oh, okay then. So we kind of basically sort of rewrote the part or created the part as we were rehearsing the show. And then interestingly, I did it a few years later, and a lot of the stuff that we'd made up for that show was then in the script, you know, so it had just become the part, you know, which is great.
Yeah.
And, you know, then Tony had decided that he wasn't going to be daming the following year. And in a very lovely gesture at the rap party, you know, the end of the run party, he, possibly fueled by a little red wine, dragged me around to all the producers and said, let me introduce you to your next dame. And it worked, you know. They asked me to come back as Dame next year. And, you know, I sort of told them that's what I wanted to do, and that's where I saw myself going if they were interested. And, yeah, happily they were. And I came back, and I think it was Jack and the Beanstalk, I think we did, was my first year as Dame. And, yeah, I was like, oh, yeah, this is what I should be doing. I mean, I could, you know, in all honesty, I could do without the shaving and the makeup, but it's kind of integral. But it is brilliant to have that kind of freedom in a show with an audience. Is that I think that you know, you have the story characters, you have the prince and the princess, the king and the queen, you know, the baddie. Yeah. And they have to tell the story, and fine. And as the Dame, you're involved in the story to whatever degree, depending on which panto it is. But really, I think the sort of the way, and you take the audience by the hand, you know, you and the comic, and you bring the audience in and the kids into the show, and that sort of freedom to, when something happens on the stage, to kind of go, did you see that too? That's not supposed to happen, is it? You know, and you know, and letting them into the, you know, into the joke kind of thing. It's, you know, and it's a privilege as well to have that connection, and to have all the people who come up. And, you know, in Fourth Call, we have a few, you know, we do a relaxed performance for people with additional needs, whatever they might be. And we have a guy who comes 6 or 7 times, and he's got special needs, and he's very vocal, you know, and he calls out, and he's very involved, and it's amazing, you know. And the first time it happens, it's a bit of a, oh, what's going on? This guy's we're having a conversation whilst I'm trying to do this, and then when you realize, oh, it's, you know, Bob's in, so it's and you do the show, like, you know, and he's part of it, and that's great, you know, and he absolutely loves it, you know. And yeah, we have a young guy who would pinch his mum's phone and message us on Facebook saying, "I love Panto," blah, 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 and, loads of reams of info about Panto and stuff because they love it, and they, and the kids coming up and it's a brilliant experience and to be Dame, you kind of. Or the way I see my Dame, anyway. I don't want to speak for every Dame in the country, but the way I see my Dame is I'm the mam. Mm-hmm. I'm everyone's mam when you come in, and it doesn't. If you're 6 and you're sat with your mam, I'm mam's mam as well. I'm everyone's mam, and that's a real privilege. To be allowed and to be trusted and to be in that role for those 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it might be, and making everyone feel involved and safe and ready to laugh and have a good time and make those Christmas memories.
Definitely. So who would you most like to co-star with in Panto if you could use anybody?
Oh, wow. Well, that's a bit tough because honestly, because when I think about Panto, I think about the other dames, and you kind of, and of course, there are some great dames, Christopher Biggins, obviously, you want to do that. And Kev Johns in Swansea has been a dame there for forever. And, there are lots of those. I mean, there's some great Panto people. And I think one of the things I love about Panto, I mean, current Panto is that there's still a lot of those sort of club comic type comics. So people who, I mean, I think of someone like Shane Ritchie, who sort of came from club comedy and now is obviously EastEnders and everything and all of that kind of thing. But I think he approaches things with that kind of club comic mentality, that he's done the graft, and so there are people like that, and Brian Connolly and people who have been doing Panto for 30 years, I mean, I think if you could be Panto through the ages, who could be, I mean, I'd love to have worked with Stan Stennett, John Inman was an amazing Panto performer, there's, Cliff used to do Pantos. Can you imagine being in Panto with Cliff?
I know.
Hilarious, isn't it? And all the shadows, were crowded. But yeah, I think there are loads of great performers, and I think there are lots of people who end up in Panto, and you kind of think, well, what have they got to bring to the table, and people who maybe have been in some, they've done a TV show like a talent show or something, and you kind of think, oh well, but we're all performers, and you've all got to do both. Everyone's got to do 2 shows a day, and you've got to be prepared to do the work. And I think if whoever it is, to someone like, I don't know, Chico or who could be sort of forgotten or dismissed or whatever, people who have had like a 15 minutes searing fame kind of thing, and then they become people who perform. Well, this is what I do. I do this, and it stops being sort of based on that 15 minutes and just becomes, well, I've been doing Panto for 20 years. So this is what I do now, and those people who, I mean, I've never worked with Chico, but a friend of mine has, said he's lovely. I don't know. I'm sure he's nice. You've just got to work with the person as they are in the room, and as long as they're up for a laugh and up for getting it right and up for doing the work, then it kind of doesn't matter who they are or what the sort of qualifying factor is for being there. If you're there because you're in a hot TV show, or you're there because you've been performing on the stage for 30 years, or you're there because you ate a worm on a telly show last year, it doesn't matter. If you're there and if you're working hard and you're doing the show, it doesn't, and you work to your strengths, whatever they are. And some people can sing and dance, and some people are funny, and some people are neither of those things, but are able to laugh at themselves. And sometimes that's enough, if you're working with strong enough performers around you. And
Yeah, and as long as the show is good, I don't think it really, I think some people are a bit sniffy. These people who are a little bit famous or the wrong kind of famous to be in shows, and I don't really buy that. And also, I mean, the only thing that makes me annoyed about Panto is when people kind of go, "Oh, I could end up in Panto." I think I heard Robbie Williams say that on Graham Norton, and I thought, mate, you fell apart being in a coddled boy band. You wouldn't last 5 minutes in Panto.
Yeah.
You wouldn't. You couldn't do it. You couldn't do it. You were not physically able to survive Panto. And so Robbie Williams, although I love Robbie Williams fine. So yeah, yes. So I'll say yes, and I'll pretend that was the answer to the question, so that I can no longer remember.
Okay. So from all the pantos that you've done, is the one that you haven't done that you'd really, really like to do?
What panto haven't I done that I'd like to?
Mm.
I think when you're daming, there are sort of three big ones, really. There's Ugly Sister, which I've done, and in all honesty, not mad keen on Ugly Sistering. There's an awful lot of faff when you're a dame to then be booed. I want to be universal. If I'm gonna shave every day, all the makeup on and the fake boobs and the mad costume, I want to be universally loved for it, right? So I think, there's that. Then there's Mother Goose, which is where the dame is the star, really. And I'd love to do a version of Mother Goose. It's not done so much anymore, which I think is a shame. There's a few that aren't done much anymore. And I think it's a shame. Like Babes in the Wood never seems to be done anymore. And when I was a kid, it seemed to be on all. I think I saw Babes in the Wood. I mean, you think of your panto life when you're a kid, you probably only see 4 or 5. Yeah. And I saw Babes in the Wood at least twice, which is, percentage-wise, that's quite a lot, isn't it? I think it used to be a much more popular. You got to have Robin Hood in and stuff, I guess. Robin Hood was very popular then, I suppose. Maybe that's thinking about it. So this is a Robin Hood-based sidebar, Rachel, because Michael Praeder's been Robin Hood, so I guess Robin Hood was super popular in the early 80s, so they would have been doing that a lot more. Never thought about that before. Anyway, and I think the sort of other grand dame, as it were, is Widow Twankey in Aladdin, obviously, which I am about to do. Well, not this year, but next year now. In sort of the next panto in Portugal, Aladdin has come around again, and I'm going to be Widow Twankey there. Tickets available now. And I think they are.
They probably are.
So, yeah, absolutely. So I think that I mean, Widow Twankey is kind of, when people think of dames, I think they think of Cinderella, they think of Jack and the Beanstalk and Aladdin. I think those are the sort of big ones, really. I think fiscally, Cinderella is always the one. If a theatre's had a bad year, they'll put Cinderella on because everybody goes to see Cinderella. People love it, as well they might. And that's probably the most traditional of pantos, isn't it, Cinderella? But yeah, I think probably if you're a dame, it's got to be Widow Twankey. Yeah. And then, of course, there are routines that come with these roles because I played Dame Trot in Jack and the Beanstalk, but we didn't get to do, and I don't know, maybe you wouldn't be allowed to do it anymore. I don't know. Is it something that's gone by the wayside? But the sort of traditional routine would be that, Jack sells the cow, he gets the beans, Jane Trot is angry at the beans, and she sends him to bed without any supper, which they didn't have anyway, which they had to send the cow, so it's kind of empty threat. And she throws the beans out of the window, she gets ready for bed, goes to bed, and then when she wakes up, the beanstalk is there, and we see the beanstalk grow. And traditionally, there would be a stripper routine, which you'd throw the beans out, and then I'd better get ready for bed. And you'd have like 30 layers on. You know this routine, yeah? And there's a great version online of Terry Scott from Terry and Jude doing it. And he's got all these different things and things written on his
on his bloomers, and so yeah, all sorts of funny stuff, and lots of different names to the tune of the stripper, to da 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 da. But I don't know if people would. It was a weird time when I was a kid, that I'm just gonna have to plug myself in because I think I'm running out of battery. That all kids knew that, like, the stripper music. So yeah, I think with some clever renaming and maybe different music. I don't know what the modern equivalent would be, but there isn't a tune now that universally means get your kit off. But I don't know, maybe something like Pussycat Dolls or something.
Yeah.
Do a whole routine to Pussycat Dolls or something, and then went to bed. I think that was, people would get the gist. But I think it's a shame. I think a lot of those really traditional, not quite sort of bit of Bluefoot dads, but that area, I think there's a lot of that stuff that can come back and be sort of accepted. And I think if you treat things with a modern eye, then it's, I think it's not going to be offensive. People sort of have asked me in the past if panto is offensive, or if being. I was actually asked in another interview, and I'm very glad that you haven't asked me, that if I thought trans people would be offended by the Dame. And it's, of course, it's absolute rot. I don't think, and my answer then was, well, I think if you're if you're a trans person, and especially if you're a trans person of my age, 21, you would, you've got a house and kids and a car payments and a mortgage, and you've got bigger things to worry about than whether or not some dude's wearing a dress in a panto, because it's, no one's claiming to be anything. No one's claiming to be straight or trans or both of those things at once, or anything really. It's not about that.
No.
And I think if you're a very young person who's thinking along those lines about themselves, and you see a beautiful woman dressed as a boy and it being thoroughly accepted, doesn't that kind of help? Doesn't that work? And everyone in panto is accepted, whom or whatever they are, or however they identify. I identify as Dame.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Jack, woman in, high boots and slaps thigh, and everyone goes, "Oh, hi Jack, how you doing, mate?" And there's no one's throwing a sideways glance. No one's making a point that doesn't need to be made, or a point that should be made and isn't. And it's. I think that's one of the great things about panto, is that it's welcoming. Everyone can come, and everyone can watch, and everyone can have a great time, because pantos are made by everyone, normal, everyday people, whomever they are and whatever they see themselves as and however they identify, and there are all sorts of different dames. You have like a Kerry Dupree kind of dame who's very Danny LaRue and glamorous. You have me, who's very much a sort of cock in a frock kind of thing. Whilst I think I try to be a bit mumsy with mine, because of who I am and where I play it, and that I'm as I say, I see myself very much as a sort of Welsh mam kind of type, and that's, which is universal, of course. There's mams and mams everywhere. It doesn't matter where you're from. But working class, I suppose, is the thing. I grew up very working class, and that's who I. When I think of mams, I think of the mams, my mam and the ones around me growing up, and they were, they sort of ruled the roost, and they were in charge, and and they brook no quarter, which I think is how I sort of do that
it's not quite the rolling pin, but it's kind of, I'm in charge.
Mhm.
But I love everyone, but I'm in charge.
Mhm.
And that's and kids love that. Kids like knowing that they are, if someone's in charge, then they kind of feel safe, really. And if they know that they are, and the baddie can come out and be super scary, and that's fine, because they know the dame is going to come out in a minute, or the prince or the princess is going to come out in a minute, and everything will be all right again. And it's very, simple, and I don't know, the world feels very complicated. So to have some simplicity in it, I think is a good thing,
Yeah, I don't think panto should be overthought. I think it kind of misses the point if you overthink things. Where you think, oh, is it wrong that there's a man in a dress? You're overthinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of thinking to be done, but it's got to be in the right places, and I think, that's irrelevant, I think. And it's also questions, and the person who asked me that question in that interview didn't think for a second that any trans person would care about damehood. He just felt that the question should be asked, and it doesn't need to be asked, actually, because I think people are cleverer than that, and people know, and no one, whatever their situation, however they are identifying, is being thrown or pushed in a certain direction by a panto. It just is not relevant to that, And things are changing, there are pantos where, the principal boy is being sort of phased out, which I think is a shame. And there are being sort of female ugly sisters now and female dames, and that's fine, I guess, but I think it's a shame to lose a tradition that doesn't need to go anywhere. I think if you're up in Scotland, Shirley Henderson does dame up in Shirley Henderson from Ramsay Nesbitt and various things, kids show, I can't remember, and she's great, and who wouldn't want to go and see her in panto? I get that, of course, and she's not stupid, and she's very funny, so she wants to play the funny part. Well, of course she does, and but her existing doesn't mean that traditional panto dame, male panto dames, are gone or should be gone. Just all coexist together, and I'd love for there to be a female Aladdin when we do Aladdin. I don't know if there will be, but I'd be very happy to have a principal boy. And conversely, you sort of have the prince character then if you have a young lad doing it. So I don't think it's the end of the world when these things sort of change, but I think it's a shame if the tradition disappears completely.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't think you have to make a hard and fast decision across the board. Like this year, you have a male Aladdin, and next year Jack is played by a woman. Why not? I think you cast as you cast show by show, and cast the right person for the job and the best person that you can find. But I think I think we have to be careful to not be ruled by the 5% of bonkers people on Twitter. I think 99% of people in Britain who go to panto, because I don't care what people think if they never go to panto.
Yeah.
Of course, I never go myself, but I really think that part should be played by a woman. But I don't give two ticks what you think. If you never come in anyway, who cares? In what way is your opinion relevant? I think probably 99% of people who actually go to panto are happy with the traditions as they stand. And I think that we have to remember that these shows are being made by people who live in this current world in which we are living in, So if I'm surrounded by my cast in whatever it was last, I can't remember what show we did last year, Sleeping Beauty or whatever it was, and there's an opportunity for a joke that would be a little bit off color, or
could be seen as offensive, well, one of two things would happen. Either because it would be off-color and offensive, it doesn't occur to anyone. Or secondly, you say it and you laugh amongst yourselves, and then you decide whether or not it's suitable for the show. And if you think, well, that's funny to us, but if I was 7, I wouldn't think that was funny. You know, I had a joke in a panto script that was about Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump. Now, I sincerely hope you don't know who Stormy Daniels is. No, I'm sure you do. And the joke was fine. It wasn't super funny. But I thought, I'm not telling a joke about a porn star to an audience of 7-year-olds when 7-year-olds are the target audience. I'm just not doing that. That's not the balance. You know, you have jokes that are for the parents, of course, because you don't want anyone to be bored. Everyone should be entertained. Everyone should have a good time. But that's not how you do that kind of joke. No. And, you know, I think it was a joke about, it was Sleeping Beauty, something to do with the baby. I forget what the original joke was, but I changed it to, they should have called this baby America. She's got a wicked Trump. You know, so, I mean, I'm not really down with Trump jokes. I mean, this was 2 or 3 years ago now, so they were a bit more relevant then. I thought they were kind of played out even then. So that was my nod to it. I wasn't going to do any more. That was as political as we got in our version of Sleeping Beauty. And it was fine, and it got a nice laugh because Trump is a fan. And kids who don't get the political side of the joke know that Trump means fart, and so they think everything to do with farts is hilarious. So I always got a good laugh, even in the school shows. And the other one just would have dropped onto the stage like a rotten egg and rolled into the pit and spoiled everyone's day. So I didn't even say it out loud in rehearsals. I just rewrote it when I was learning the script, and when we did the first read through, I did the rewritten version, and no one said anything. So either everyone agreed with me, or they just didn't notice because they weren't paying attention. But I think, you know, so jokes like that will happen, and you know, are there jokes in Aladdin in the past that have been questionable with the fact that it's set in China? Almost certainly. Will we do any of those jokes? I shouldn't have thought so. Because apart from anything else, the modern audience won't laugh at them. So you're not defending a tradition or standing up for anything if you tell a joke that no one laughs at. All you're doing is not getting a laugh. So you've got to, you know, I mean, the last time I did Aladdin, I was the genie, as I say, but I was also the emperor, and I was also one of the Chinese policemen, you know, and the policemen were called Ping and Pong, right? Now, is that wildly offensive? I don't think it's wildly offensive. Would it be the end of the world if those are still the names in pantos up and down the country? I don't think so. And, you know, if we were to get a complaint from like an actual Chinese person, I suppose we'd kind of think about it. But I don't really care. You know, if you were to, I mean, I know if people at home will see you, but you are not Chinese. You're not Chinese. Yeah. No. If you pretend to be offended about that, I don't really care, because I think you're just pretending. I don't think it's true. So, you know, but I don't think anyone's going to be going around doing sort of terrible 1960s replacing R's with L's kind of Chinese accent type nonsense. That's just not happening, because it won't occur to anyone in the show to do it. And if we did it, no one would get the reference in the audience because it's not anywhere anymore, and it wouldn't get any laughs. So what would be the point? You know? So I think these shows aren't as... People conflate traditional with old-fashioned, and that's not what, you know. They have different names because they're different things, you know. And things that are traditional can be very modern within the traditions, you know, and things that are old-fashioned are old-fashioned, and that's a different thing. And things that are wildly offensive are wildly offensive, and that's a different thing too, you know. And I think you've got to use the word for the thing that you're doing. And we're doing panto, and panto has traditions, but one of panto's traditions isn't being horribly offensive. There you go. Edit that down to a 4-second soundbite.
Right, we're going to finish off with a quick fire round.
Okay, good go.
Okay, ready?
I predict I will be rubbish at this.
No, it's quite simple, don't worry. So, tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Sun or rain?
Rain.
Cats or dogs?
Neither.
Musical or play?
Yeah, you see, because when it's I'm going to say musical.
Comedy or tragedy?
Comedy.
Sweet or savoury?
Sweet.
Meat or veg? You be clean.
Yeah. Meat.
Hugs or kisses?
Oh, hugs.
Night out or night in?
Oh, night out.
Tour or West End run?
Well, I'll say West End Run because I haven't done one of those yet.
Favourite film?
Marty.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's great. It's got Ernest Borgnine in it. It's from 1955, and it's just a wonderful film.
Okay, that's one for my Google list. And favourite book?
Heidi?
Okay.
Yeah, you weren't expecting that, were you? Yeah, because I read it when I was a kid, and I read it to my daughter when she was little, and it is a really lovely book. And like, you know, all the Jack Reachers, obviously. But
What the ultimate is Heidi. Okay. Last question. Ultimate comfort food?
Any cereal. If you can come in a bowl and you put milk on it, yeah, I'm down with that.
Cool. Thank you very much. And I'll say goodbye.
Thank you. Good to see you.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.